Thanks very much for being back here. We really want to get to the evidence that Team Trump has and what you will be presenting to the courts. You said yesterday, look, we're not going to litigate this in the public square.
Absolutely. And Maria, no credible attorney is going to go out and actually show the evidence to the mainstream media to have them pick apart and especially dox witnesses when we've already had this type of intimidation of our own attorneys. So what always happens is that attorneys will say this is what the evidence will show. They'll give press conferences. They may go out and speak on media. But when the media covers the actual trial, that's when everything happens in a court of law. And let's remember, the mainstream media gave all of the Democrats 3.5 years of airtime and never once asked them for any proof of the Russia collusion narrative. They just took their statements as fact, but they're not even giving us 3.5 weeks to go into court and prove our case. And so this is something where the double standard here by the media is absolutely hypocritical, and it just shows that they want to have an outcome rather than looking at fact and truth and actually getting to the bottom of their own investigation. What we have already, by saying that we have witnesses who have seen all of these instances of voter intimidation, of the ballot counts that were manipulated, of ballot counts in secret, all of these things is how you prove this type of case in a court of law. I've been a criminal prosecutor. What you do is you take the statement of eyewitnesses and you put them in court, and then the jury in court can't, or the judge as the fact finder, assesses the credibility, looks at the evidence. And we have people who are convicted of criminal offenses beyond a reasonable doubt with less evidence than what we have today. So to say that there's no evidence, the mainstream media just doesn't understand how the law works. They don't understand how evidence works, and they don't understand that they are not the jury or the court of law. They're simply the court of public opinion, and we don't actually owe them anything. We owe the American people the truth, and we owe that to go into court and actually prove our case.
Well, I think you make a lot of important points, and I agree in terms of now we know what the president's critics are capable of. We saw what went on in 2016. I reported on this extensively and recognize that they interfered into election in 2016 by trying to take down then candidate Trump and then a sitting president. You know, one of the things that really gets me down about this whole story is what you just mentioned, and that is the doxing and the reaction from the other side. We spoke with Sidney Powell a while ago. We had to call her on a different number because one of her phone numbers was doxed. We heard about the Michigan canvassers, that they were threatened and doxed online. In other words, their numbers were shown online, and they got massive pushback from people who they didn't even know. I mean, it just seems like the president's critics, it's their way or the highway, and if they don't agree with you, well, then they'll just throw bricks in your window and force your small business to board up. It's really a sad state of affairs.
Absolutely, Maria. And isn't it, it's just terrible, and it's shocking and disturbing that these people just want to rush to coronate Joe Biden, and they're not interested in the facts or interested in saving our American system, and that every legal vote should count. That shouldn't be controversial. And so the fact that you have the intimidation of witnesses, you have intimidation of voters, you have intimidation of election officials now, you have intimidation of attorneys simply because we represent President Trump. I mean, I've even gotten hate mail and death threats and all kinds of things over the past just even couple of weeks since this came out. I mean, this is America. We don't back down to that kind of terrorism and intimidation. It's absolutely absurd, and every American should want this case to be litigated.
Yeah, right. But Jenna, I understand what you're saying. You're not going to litigate this in the public square. However, at the press conference yesterday, you outlined how there are constitutional procedural safeguards against corruption and foreign influence in elections that should be put into place here. And even though you're not going to litigate this for the media and you're going to do this through the courts, you do have a responsibility to inform the public of what you're doing, because we all need clarity. Business needs clarity. The public needs clarity to know where we're going in 2021. And is there something real here that would overturn what looks like Joe Biden coming in as the president? So what can you tell us in the way of evidence, Jenna, to help the public understand why you believe you can actually show and prove in a court of law that this election was rigged and that there were votes changed from Trump to Biden?
Yes, and that's exactly why we held the press conference yesterday, because you're right. We owe the American people to show them basically what we will prove in court. We have affidavits from witnesses. We have voter intimidation. We have the ballots that were manipulated. We have all kinds of statistics that show that this was a coordinated effort in all of these states to transfer votes either from Trump to Biden, to manipulate the ballots, to count them in secret. And we outlined that at the press conference yesterday. And for anyone in the mainstream media who's claiming that we didn't say or show that we have evidence, Rudy Giuliani went state by state saying exactly what we have.
All right, let me ask you about your timing now. We are expecting verification and certification of these elections in the state elections in early December. Are you going to be able to get through the courts? You're going to be able to get heard, prosecute this within the next 2.5, 3 weeks, Jenna?
I hope so. It is an uphill battle, and typically these types of enforced timelines on this small scale don't happen in litigation. So this is an uphill battle. I'm confident that Team Trump will do everything we can to make sure that false results aren't certified, and that's why the Constitution provides these safeguards. This isn't the first time in American history that a presidential election has had to go through other channels and constitutional methods. That was even beginning in 1800. So the American people need to recognize the history, why the Constitution is there, and that there are safeguards for corruption, or even if the election doesn't get to 270 for either candidate, or if there are any problems, that we don't disenfranchise the American people. So this isn't just some kind of ridiculous thing that America is experiencing for the first time. That's why we have the Constitution that specifically contemplates how we get there before January 20th.